Typically, older generations complain that young people don't work as hard as they did when they were that age. However, that narrative does seem to carry some truth these days. Suddenly, it seems that Gen Z and even younger millennials are disengaged with the working world. From quiet quitting to seemingly lacking ambition, what's happened to the energy and enthusiasm that young workers used to have? I'm Jane Singer, and welcome back to A Seat at the Table, where we sit down with leaders and innovators who share their insights and expertise with our audience now in 142 countries. Today we're joined by Damon Cassidy, a former corporate banker turned content creator with a passion for analyzing economic history and systemic forces shaping the modern world. He's known for providing thought-provoking insights into generational economics, labor market shifts, and media influence. In this podcast, Damien will be discussing the real reason why younger workers seem to disengage, particularly with regard to work, how LinkedIn and similar job sites have made it almost impossible for people to get jobs, and what Gen Z really wants and what's missing in their lives. So if you're ready, let's dive in. I'd like to, first of all, thank you so much, Damien, for coming on the show. I know you're a busy guy and with a huge YouTube channel, so thank you very much for taking the time to join us here. I think that you have a lot to share, but I think particularly interesting is your insights on LinkedIn. There's a lot of conversation around job hunting these days, and particularly on the role that LinkedIn is playing either in facilitating or perhaps maybe making it more difficult. Perhaps you can start just by sharing how you see that.
LinkedIn is really interesting because it's one of the oldest popular social media platforms, and it has just amassed 1 billion users globally. What makes that so interesting is that the numbers that we see are immense. So there's over 9,000 applications every minute. Wow. But then you get down to the bottom line of 7 people get a job off LinkedIn every minute. So you can see, well, that's not necessarily ideal. Over 100 million people do job applications on the platform a month. I'm not sure on the fact because I've seen it deviate, but it looks like roughly 3 million people get a job off LinkedIn a year. So it shows that it's just absolutely horrible metrics for getting a job. But because it's been so ingrained in society on a business stance, it really has become this platform that is almost seen as a necessity for recruiters, for HR managers, for people trying to get a sense of the applicant. And so you kind of fall into this place of it doesn't work, it's not really beneficial. There's a lot of fake listings that are happening on there, fake recruiters, a lot of deceit, and like we'll probably discuss in a little bit, how it's kind of just turned into a Facebook in itself. So it feels like a platform that isn't designed to actually help the candidate, and yet it's almost mandatory to force you into having to use it. An interesting statistic is about 75% of applications are never even seen by a human. It goes through the ATS, the application tracking system, and it just kind of vanishes. For those that do see the application, it's about 6 to 8 seconds on the initial look. So that shows that the applicant or the recruiter is doing a very brief glance at all of the applications that they have. So what is it that's drawing their attention? And probably it's the cleanness of the resume and different things like that. But it shows that 40% of recruiters have hired someone just based off of their LinkedIn profile. So that shows that they are looking for LinkedIn on the resume or whatever it is that they're looking at on the application. So again, it kind of just reinforces that mandatory or that necessity for a candidate to have a LinkedIn profile, where in many ways, I think it actually discourages the worker more and could potentially lead to them not even wanting to participate in the labor market.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because you're right. You are sort of obligated to have a LinkedIn profile and to at least list some of the jobs that you've had. And yet at the same time, what you're pointing out, and I've heard this from an increasing number of people, that applying for jobs on LinkedIn is an exercise in futility. Because like you're saying, no one really looks at what you're filling out. The sense of having people just flip through something that you've spent hours working on, nobody reads it. It's very hard to differentiate yourself. AI just scanning for certain keywords. How do you see that?
I think that it's really bad. I mean, what a lot of my audience tied it to was the dating market. And I have to kind of agree because when you look at even, say, a Facebook profile, an Instagram profile, societally, we've had these platforms long enough that you start to judge based off of what people are posting in terms of the success it's going to provide. It's not really authentic anymore. And so when you look at a LinkedIn profile, it's very similar. You're seeing, oh, they're doing this. That's not quite as good as somebody else that's doing this. And you start to look at the metrics instead of what the person could be providing. Is this person providing a unique stance? Well, if they are, it doesn't fit in the mold of the LinkedIn atmosphere. An interesting component on this too is that you actually get punished if you get laid off and you show that on LinkedIn that you stopped a job and then maybe there was a 4-month gap, 6-month gap, which is how long it's taking to find a job. That LinkedIn will now be promoting your LinkedIn profile less than others because now algorithmically you are less desirable in the eyes of a recruiter. And so it's the opposite of what you would hope would be happening. You would think, okay, this person is no longer in a job. Maybe let's push them more because we want to help the candidate or because, maybe this is a great opportunity or all of these different components that maybe logically you would think, but algorithmically, that is not what's happening. And it just pushes these other individuals that maybe don't want to spend tons of time polishing their LinkedIn profile because maybe they're working or maybe they're working on their skills. Maybe they're doing actual things that you would want for them to be more desirable. And they're just not getting seen, which is, I think, a disastrous situation. And it just continues to grow.
It's a pity to hear that because people try so hard to be able to put their best foot forward. And in a very competitive market, you need to stand out. And yet when everything is systematized like that, you're really reduced to your lowest, the lowest common denominator, so to speak. Now you had mentioned that oftentimes companies post jobs just to make themselves look like they're hiring when it's not an actual job, ghost jobs, labor harvesting. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen around that?
Yes. The really difficult component is that we don't know to the magnitude in which it's happening because it fits under a broad amount of different characteristics that would define a ghost job. But with that being said, there was a study of 1,000 hiring managers and 50% admitted that they routinely post ghost jobs just to be able to harvest a data pool for whenever they are ready to hire. About 75% of them purposely post jobs and keep it open for 6 months. And then there's like about a 30 to 35% of hiring managers that do that just to give the illusion that they are going to bring a new candidate or a new person into the workforce for those that are experiencing kind of a skeleton crew to kind of give hope to them that help is coming. And then about a 40% of those also admitted that they do that to give the illusion of growth for the company. Another study was done where they found that there was 1.7 million ghost jobs just on LinkedIn, just in the United States.
Wow.
And again, it's hard to know. If they're able to find that, I would imagine that the number is even larger. I believe that jobs available in the United States is about 9 to 14 million that's posted on the LinkedIn. So even if you say you double the 1.7, I mean, that's still a very large portion. And for people that are circling through, the likelihood is you're going to hit a lot of the ghost jobs because those are probably the ones that are a little bit more desirable for the competitors or for the growth that they might want to have in their career. And even in the UK, there was another study that was done that it looked like about, I don't know, even maybe 50% of the jobs that were posted were completely fake jobs based on they were on the platform for longer than 60 days. And so again, that kind of leads into candidates continuously doing these applications, not getting anywhere, getting discouraged, doing hundreds and hundreds of different applications. And you can only do that for so long, especially when these companies are using it to harvest your data. Also, they are sending it about 75% of Fortune 500 companies and about 85% of the government roles are sending all of your data to platforms like Equifax. And then this gets dispersed to advertisers for job boards so that they can see the perfect outline of you as a candidate. And so really, if you are just someone that has good character, good morals, you're a hard worker, you have a good polished resume, it probably still isn't enough because every single little flaw is already seen by these individuals. And so really, all you are doing on these online platforms is you were just selling your data for them to make billions of dollars to then make the application even harder for the candidate. So it really is a horrible system.
Yeah, I certainly can see what you're saying on that. And you're right. People get caught in that trap that this is the only way you can find a job. Maybe this will bring us back around to people going back to the old way of doing it, which is writing to companies directly, getting back to snail mail or something like that, and just simply sending off something so that they can get ahead of this whole nightmare of online job applicants. I've heard this just from so many people, how frustrating it is and how difficult it is to break through that you wonder really what job categories actually find success going through that. I mean, there's probably a certain job description or job category that more of it is successful by making these kind of applications. But it does seem like you're saying for someone who is perhaps looking for a more senior role or brings a little bit more, right? You can't really express it in some of these online, very structured applications that are purpose built so that they can be scanned by AI or by some other kind of a digital format.
Absolutely right. And also it's really difficult for the entry level position because when you look at the LinkedIn algorithm, they want to see that you have work history. So say that you were going through college and you were working at the local ice cream shop or something like that, and now you're wanting to get into sales. Well, that isn't really incentivizing LinkedIn to be pushing your platform. That also, just in the eyes of the recruiter, about 75% of them are now saying that they are looking at replacing the entry level job with AI. And another about 85% or just a really large percentage don't even see the point of hiring recent college graduates. And so not only are these higher level individuals not able to articulate really what they can provide, lower level or people trying to begin their career really have no chance. The people that are efficient on LinkedIn are the ones that have been able to master the game, which in most instances, they're showing that those are the candidates you don't want because they've been going through this for so long and they're not really being honest. They've been able to manipulate the game. And then you get them as a candidate or as an actual person in part of your business. And you realize, well, they don't have the skills that they said. They were able to just go through the algorithm. So yeah, it's a disaster, but that makes in-person networking in any way that you can find a way to make that happen even more effective. I've started to really not looking for a job, but just networking as much as I possibly can. And how much it's already changed just within the past couple months is truly unreal. And so there really is a desire for people to want to see what can you provide in terms of, can you communicate? Can you hold eye contact? Do you have a firm handshake? Do you dress professionally? And that's what we're seeing with a lot of these hiring managers are actually saying whenever they hire someone, they're disappointed with the fact that they can't hold eye contact. They can't have these personal components. And so it's like when you have a LinkedIn platform that is just algorithmically looking at what it is that you can provide in terms of data. Well, the person can't even articulate, hey, I'm a good person. I show up early every single day. I have a lot of the things that you truly are working for, and I can learn it quite quickly. You can't get that on a platform unless you're able to see a person face to face or even in a Zoom setting to get a sense of what is the other person like.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for in person. Zoom is the second best, but you're right. When you're trying to do everything, just looking at someone's resume on paper, it is very, very difficult. And as you're pointing out, by doing everything using AI or other digital tools, you really are optimizing for the person who, as you said, can game the system best. You optimize to get the actual worst person who is probably, once you hire them, assuming you do, is going to do the worst possible job because they'll figure out a way to game the job in your company as well. So it's crazy, but it is really a race to the bottom in its own sense.
Absolutely. Anyone that does content creation, you know that you've probably had some of your best podcasts perform the worst. And that typically is because your title wasn't the way that it should have been, or a thumbnail wasn't the way it should have been, or your keywords weren't enough. That can get really frustrating because it's like, this can provide so much value, but because you didn't do these little things that, in my opinion, truly shouldn't be that important, no one is able to see it. And I think that just gets so much more magnified on these job searching platforms because you still don't even get the opportunity to see the person, to be able to have them have a shot. It is just almost entirely algorithmically based. And kind of going back to the fact, if you put that you are open to work, you actually have your chances of getting hired now substantially drop because you are seen as desperate and you're seen as less desirable because recruiters want you. And so it's all of these psychological games that just, in my opinion, is a complete waste. And again, I think that we really need to start focusing on what is happening with these young men, these young individuals. Why are so many people leaving the workforce? Why is this not getting fully put into the data points? I've spoken with so many discouraged workers. It really is going to become a substantial issue, I think, in the next decade. And all we're focusing on is these headline labor market numbers that truly aren't even reflective of what's actually going on.
Yeah, absolutely true. There's just so much to unpack around the big data numbers and how that does not reflect what's going on in the economy, that oftentimes it's so skewed, right? They'll talk about what GDP is, and then they don't tell you that it's like 3 companies that account for most of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? They don't really show you a true picture. Everything is aggregated into one lump sum. And I think you're right. You have a lot of people who feel very, I don't know if this is the right word, but disenfranchised in the workforce. And you wonder why, right? People say, well, everyone's gotten lazy. And yes, to some extent that may be true because we were on an economic high for a long time. Salaries were going up. You know what I mean? It was a lot of hiring. But at the same time, we've had other times like that in history. This is not like a first. And I've never sensed so much discouragement amongst people. And you wonder, are people just raised spoiled? Maybe people say that, like people were handed everything, so therefore they don't feel like they have to work for anything. And that might be the case in some cases. But yeah, you do wonder what's going on and how that's going to play out in the long term, right? For a society that you need people to work. People need a purpose. It's more than just getting a salary. People forget about that. And there's a lot to say for having a job, whether you be a young person just trying to get into the workforce or the fact that they try to push people out now when you get to be, I don't know, over 45 or something is considered old these days. So we were talking just the other day with saying how, I forget who I was talking to, but they were saying how there's people in their company who've been there over 30 years and they're very proud of it. It's a privately held company, family owned. And I was like, wow, I remember the old days when companies were proud of having people. Now they're like, oh, we don't want those old people around. So they kick people out at that end. They don't want the young people to come in because lack experience or whatever. I don't know. It's a bit of a conundrum.
It absolutely is. And I think you mentioned, again, this isn't the only time that has happened in history. I think that what we're really seeing is the emergence of social media as well as the education system changing the narrative in terms of educating to more of, I kind of want to say propagandizing what things should look like instead of what they are. So I remember growing up hearing about the American dream, about owning a home, about all these different components that kind of, instead of maybe having moral values or these other values, it was, you're supposed to own a home, you're supposed to have a nice car, you're supposed to have all of these different components. So by the time that I come into the age of the workforce, now thankfully I got a good job, but for most that couldn't. And then you see, I can't get any of these things that I was told my whole entire life are the only reason that I'm supposed to be here. This is what makes America great, instead of the actual reasons that makes the United States great. And so then you feel like betrayed by the nation. You start to resent the older generations. You begin to resent all of these different components. And then it flips because an older individual is like, imagine how much more successful I could have been if I could have known all the things that these younger individuals can, because they have access to the internet. And so there's resentment growing on both sides. No one is able to communicate. And you can see, dating back for like the last 100 or so years, headlines on newspapers saying, why do young people not want to work anymore? It's a common narrative. And it's interesting how each generation seems to forget that they did it when they were younger as well. And so this is really when we're needing a time for older individuals to be speaking with younger individuals and for both to be able to actually have a discussion instead of pointing fingers and just starting to yell, because it's not doing anything. It's getting things actually worse. And I think that in some ways, I think younger individuals do need to take the responsibility of, maybe I don't have as much skills. Maybe I did think things were going to be easier. Maybe I do need to do more, but there has to also be some sort of leniency of, these people are still young. Of course, they don't have the experience that's needed. And if I'm going to pay you $15 an hour, I can't expect for you to have a decade of experience. Like, that just isn't going to work, especially with how expensive things are. And so there's a massive disconnect. I have optimism with how many people view my videos, because that just makes me think, societally speaking, this is a component that is in the minds and the eyes of a lot of different people. And so I'm hoping that with the discussions that we're having, it will begin to get better at some point. I just think that we haven't really even seen the worst of it. And I imagine this is probably a decade-long issue that is going to hurt probably an entire generation.
Yeah, I think you have a very good point there. And I think that, yes, it will take longer than expected. And I agree with you. Social media has heightened the problem in the sense that it's given people even greater expectations than the generations before social media in terms of what lifestyle people can expect to have. And especially when a lot of it is not a real lifestyle, right? A lot of it is a falsified version of what people would like to pretend they have. But it puts more pressure on people to feel that they're not successful. And, I think the confluence of that, plus the fact that we're sort of coming off this era, hopefully coming off this era, that was just fueled by a tremendous amount of venture capital and these massive, what they call unicorns, that gave everyone the idea that not only did you have to have the house, the car, whatever, but now you had to be able to found one of these billion-dollar companies or become one of the tech CEOs. And it was just crazy. It made everybody feel like a failure. I mean, I know people who've started their own business, are doing very, very well. And they tell me they're depressed that the business isn't going well. And I say, well, are you struggling to get sales? You can't find staff. And it's not that, it's not that. But they feel that they haven't hit these huge numbers. And they feel like if they're not doing billions of dollars, I'm like, well, are you doing as well as you did when you had a job, right? Working for someone else? Yeah, doing like at least as well. Yes. So what's wrong, right? But they have the vision that if they haven't hit that, they're a failure.
You're absolutely right. And I think that I heard it on your podcast, or I wasn't sure if it might have been somebody else's, but someone was talking about that we don't talk about what these, whenever you create a company and you sell it, how much you hear that you're making, say, $30 million, but everyone thinks that you are selling it for $1 billion. So if I'm not selling this business for $1 billion, it isn't successful. I'm doing something wrong. And it's like, how did we turn $100,000 used to be $100,000 salary used to be like, this is something, and $1 million was like, wow. And now it's like, if you don't have a $50 million net worth by the time you're 35, you're a failure.
Right.
And in some ways, I understand the fact of maybe $100,000 doesn't go as far, but the way that we have just gotten our perspectives shifted, you can still do so much with just $1 million. If you're selling your company for 10 million, I mean, that is still life-changing money. And so, yeah, it's this comparison cycle and these digital echo chambers is really, and it kind of goes all the way back to LinkedIn, is again, the algorithm pushes a certain bias or a certain thing that kind of gets the attention of the recruiter, of the consumer, of the viewer on a social media platform. And the reality, what is actually happening, you can't view that anywhere. You can't see that. There's no just regular conversations. There's no just, hey, I just had a good coffee at a coffee shop, or just spoke with someone. That isn't posted. It's, I bought 3 Lamborghinis and now I'm going to floor them into a wall and then go sign up on my, whatever platform. It's like, this doesn't make sense. And yet it's pulling millions of views.
Yes.
I think that at some point, as a society, we are really going to get burnt out from that. And I think you're already beginning to see that just a little bit on YouTube videos, kind of like what we were discussing earlier, of these authentic videos, people really wanting to kind of just see someone talk instead of this kind of Mr. Beast style of videos.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely seeing that on YouTube, that a lot of that hype is starting to get old. And now you're seeing a lot of big creators talk about the fact that we've got to get past all of that. People making false claims about what they're doing and so on. I suppose the whole influencer type of a movement, I'm hearing more and more about how that is starting to wane, that consumers don't believe these people anymore, that they see them as just being paid to shill this or that product. Not, it used to be that this was their honest opinion. Now it's just whatever they're getting paid to promote, and people claiming lifestyles that they don't really have. It's all rented or fake. So it's interesting. I guess it's just an era that's passing, but it has taken a lot of people and sort of crushed I guess you might say, their sense of self-esteem even, because no matter what they achieve, it feels like they're not doing anything.
We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
Most definitely. I mean, if you are a 23-year-old kid that went to a community college and then you just went to some regular college and now you're making $40,000 a year and you drive a Toyota Camry or something like that, you have a sense that you are a failure, because what you see is these younger individuals with this perfect physique and everything that you could ever want in making millions of dollars. And a funny meme that I get recommended a lot is me on my way to my 9 to 5 while some kid is making $1 million on YouTube or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that just societally, we've kind of just even lost what is a job really supposed to mean? What are all of these different components? I think that there is still a lot of, there's a lot to be said if you're making $50,000 a year. I mean, that's still higher than the median salary that the nation is experiencing. So if you're making $16,000 more than the median, you're a successful person. And so I think that really, as a society, we don't feel like we're enough. We don't feel like our actions are enough. It's no longer, if you just had a day that maybe you just cleaned your apartment or something like that, that's no longer seen as a success. You need to clean your apartment. You need to go clean your car. You need to make sure that your meals are prepped for the entire week, and you need to do this and this and this and this. And it's and still you're I could have done it faster, or it's this just hyper focus on checking the check marks or these achievements. And it's no longer about actually living a life.
That is so true. And I think you see that in people's personal lives, because like you say, that whole sense of what other people do has been sensationalized. Not that we didn't have that before, because you always had glossy magazines and all kinds. There's always been things like that, right? But it's not in your face as much as it is now. So yes, people definitely, feel that pressure that they're not achieving enough. They're not getting enough done. I think on a job situation, I don't know if you feel this, but because you need to do so much more, so much faster in this particular, I suppose, economic environment that we're in, there's never any satisfaction. It's not like, in the early days when I started working, it was not as fast paced. And I mean, companies made a lot of money in those days, actually. They were very profitable. It wasn't like everybody was living in poverty. They weren't. And you can go back and look at the financial earnings on many, many companies. But you did things, and then you sat back and you could evaluate what you did. You got to work on something and feel some sense of I'm achieving something, I'm creating something. It wasn't just get as much done as fast as you can. Just crank it out, keep going, keep going, keep going. Who cares what it looks like, how it is? I think people feel like I don't even know why I'm at this job. There's no satisfaction, right?
Most definitely. I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons why I quit my job. Been there for 5 years, working at a bank, started as a teller, worked my way up. And there was an instance that for me to be able to get promoted, I had to hit all of these different checkpoints that they kept just extending and extending and extending. I kept hitting them. And there was 1 month where our branch had brought in, I don't know, it was like 1.7 million in investments in the past year. And that was before that I got in there into that position. So we were doing awful. In 1 month, I did over 2 million. So I'd already done better than the entire year prior. And that was just about my fourth month in that position. It wasn't good job. It wasn't, continue to do what you're doing. Can we learn from what it is, your tactics? It was, you didn't sell as many credit cards as the month prior. And as soon as that was said to me, I was like, I'm leaving this because I'm not here to be just selling credit cards, especially in a high interest rate environment. And the people that brought this money was because I genuinely was speaking to them as a human being and I was learning from them. And it just so happened that we were a good fit for them. And so, yeah, you can't help but feel, I just did better than your whole last year. I don't get a good job. I don't get anything. Everyone made more money off that than I did because I was getting capped. So I didn't even benefit off of it financially. And all I get is you didn't sell as many credit cards as last month. And that's just a devastating feeling because it's like, it clearly isn't, I'm clearly not in a position to be helping someone with their financial needs. I'm here to be helping everyone else everyone besides the client with their financial needs. And yeah, I think that completely turned me off from the position that I worked at. And you just hear that a lot with these people in the finance industry of how soul sucking it is. And I think you're just seeing that all across the board. I think tech has become that too. And I think that's kind of why the societal push may be towards blue collar jobs, besides them making more money now. But there's a sense of, I created that. I was a part of something that did something.
Right.
You can go back and you can look at the playground you built. Or my dad has been a master carpenter my whole entire life. So I can go to a spot where I know that I helped him create this shed or create this deck or help build this house. When I was going to school, I went to a Montessori school. He built one of the schools.
Wow.
And so that's an incredible feeling to be able to know that for the rest of my life, until that gets destructed, I can go to a spot that he built something. And no one, I left, and maybe a month later, no one even remembered my name anymore. And that's kind of the culture that we've turned into, where maybe 60, 70 years ago, it was, like you mentioned, this person's been with us for 30 years. He's an expert in the industry. We're going to miss him when he retires. Whenever he retires, we want to bring him back because we need his expertise so much more. Now, can't wait to get rid of you because now we don't have to pay you,
Right.
your higher salary or whatever the kind of gross nature things have turned into.
Yes, I think you've summed that up very well. It's really a soul sucking, money first, kind of a mentality that I think ultimately will burn itself out because you can't continue on beyond a certain point. But in the short run, you can have a very good ride and make a ton of money. But I think this sense of, cutting everybody out just to be able to squeeze profits more. It's not that you don't have to watch what obviously everyone has a budget and you have to be able to keep an eye on the bottom line. But I think when you get to the point where you're cutting too deep, you're not trimming the fat anymore. You're cutting the muscle and the heart out of organizations that look precariously frail at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, in my position, I wasn't making like a disgusting amount of money, but I was making enough to be able to put a roof over my head. And so would I have liked to have made more money? Absolutely. But it would have meant a lot more to me to feel that I'm in a place that I'm respected, that I'm in a place where they want to be with me, that there's collaboration. So I think, you're not only trimming the fat in terms of the monetary aspect, you're trimming the fat in terms of what I think a lot of people want. I think as long as you're able to provide a roof over your head, save some money, be able to maybe put your kids through college or something, hit kind of your basic needs, really what people are looking for is some sort of sense of unity in what it is that they're doing. And that is completely gone. And I think that's kind of what's frustrating in terms of the eye of the employee is this return to office mandate, where in most companies, there is no collaboration to begin with. So it really seems pointless. I can understand the perspective of someone like Elon Musk demanding at least 40 hours in the office because what he is doing is truly innovating so many different industries, and you need that collaboration. I think collaboration is very important. But if your job is you're working on an Excel spreadsheet all day, and then whenever you do collaboration, it's on like a Google Meet, why do you need to be in the office? That's just so that you can get monitored. And most jobs really have become that. I think that we think of all of this innovation and collaboration and all of this expanding that we're doing. But in reality, most companies are not doing that. It's all about just let's trim and cut the legs off the business to be able to show the shareholders at the end of every quarter how profitable we are, instead of for the next couple of years, we're going to take a hit, but it's going to really bring in this whole new landscape into our business. There's no more investing in anything besides just massive shareholder buybacks or company buybacks.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point as well. I mean, you look at a lot of the situation with companies, and you can't help but believe that a lot of them have done themselves in simply because the system is optimized for short-term results. So you have to be showing those quarterly results. You have to be showing growth for the sake of growth. It's about what's the next press release going to be announcing the newest thing we're doing. And so you're right. You're not building solid businesses like there used to be. You're building essentially short-term kind of a make money, move on, and let the next guy deal with the problems.
Absolutely right. I agree with everything that you're saying. And I think that really just goes into this. We're putting so much, I think you hear on a societal level, because it comes from the headlines, it comes from the press releases from corporations. People don't want to work anymore. I can't find candidates, all of these things, putting a lot of pressure on the candidate that isn't even able to find a job to begin with. I think that we have to start looking at it in terms of a brush all the way across the canvas of there are so many different issues on so many different levels. We have to start painting the picture of what is actually happening instead of trying to just look at why is a 20-year-old male not wanting to work anymore? Oh, it's because of video games. That isn't getting us anywhere at all. And all that's doing is making them more discouraged. Let's look at the historical reasons. Let's look at the societal reasons. Let's look at all of the different components that paints the picture of what is actually happening right now. And that's why I don't understand how the corporation isn't actually wanting to make it more efficient, how much money they're spending on recruiting over training. They're not getting the candidates that they want. It's clearly not efficient for them. And yet they continue to just dump more money into it. And so I also am curious why that is happening. That wouldn't make sense. And yet they keep doing it. So there's a lot of just dysfunction and restructuring that needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that perhaps what we're going to see going forward is there will be new companies that come up and they'll have a different way of doing things. They'll see an opportunity. I think that right now, as bad as things are, there's huge opportunity. I mean, if you wanted to start a business and actually do something where you're going to get good people in who want to be there, assuming you provide an environment that's supportive and collaborative, I think you have a lot of good candidates out there who would love to do that. It's just a matter of someone having that vision to do it that way. It's more small businesses that would tend to be thinking like that because they tend not to be publicly traded. So therefore, they're not focusing on, this kind of quarterly results that you fall into when you are a public company, whether you want to or not. The market demands that of you. So I think that there could be huge opportunities for people who are looking to start a business or have a small business and want to recruit people. It's not easy. It's easier said than done, but.
Absolutely. I even look at it in terms of myself. I think if I look at the trajectory of where I would like to go, seeing what is happening now will forever make my opinion on hiring individuals drastically different. I think leaders are going to emerge with a whole new perspective that this nation hasn't seen in 100 years.
I think that's a good point. And I think that you're right. In a sense, we lack leadership. When I was growing up, leadership was a very important part of what we were taught. I don't know what your situation was, but for me, through school, through summer camp, leadership was always emphasized. The teacher would sort of mark you on not only your grades academically, but whether you demonstrated leadership. In summer camp, we always encouraged you to be a good leader. What does it mean to be a leader? It wasn't just, okay, somebody told you you're in charge. It was, how do you be a good leader of people? And that was very, very much ingrained and valued. And I'm not sure we really see it that way anymore.
I don't think we do. That kind of goes back to that conversation of what is being taught in school or the achievements you're supposed to hit instead of the values that I think are important. I got really lucky. My parents were much older when they had myself and my brother. They talked about how important leadership is. They both are entrepreneurs running successful companies. So I got to see them sacrifice and to be the one that stayed late so their employees could go home, all of these different components. And I just got really lucky to have what would typically historically be called elders come into my life that had nothing to do with my family or anything, that just wanted to invest into my life and wanted to share their wisdom, wanted to go on walks with me, wanted to make sure that they could kind of balance out my perspectives. And I got really lucky too with teachers that went above and beyond. In high school, my senior year, I was really struggling. It was like, my time is not being valued here at school. So I was missing a lot of tests and these different things. And my math teacher said, hey, I know that you're going to do well. I know that you understand this stuff. Don't worry about the tests. I just want to make sure that you are valuing what it is that you're doing in your life.
Wow.
Then he taught me about what interest rate means and all these different components. He took the time out of his life to be able to do that. And he shared with me, I'm having to quit teaching because I'm not making enough to be able to support my family. To hear that as an 17, 18-year-old, that changes your perspective on a lot of things. Hearing the teacher that you really kind of looked up to the most saying, I can't even afford to pay the bills doing this. Don't do what everybody else is doing, and investing that time. And my community college English teacher wrote, I got like a 96 on an essay, and she said, really great. Continue to push more. There's something on that is what she wrote. And I think that's one of the reasons that my videos are good, is because the scripts that I write, I continue to push every single time. And that comes from what she said. And so there's a lot of these moments where I think as a young mind, you really need some of these seeds to be planted. And that just isn't happening in the way that it happened even just a decade or so ago.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think you're right. When somebody takes the time to just share a little bit of wisdom with you, or to encourage you, or to notice when you're a young person that you have talent, but perhaps you're not using it, and say, you might want to think about this, or just give you a little special attention. Yeah, this was a very big part of my life growing up as well. Teachers would do that with different people. That was more than just a salary for people. Not that they didn't want to get paid and make money. No one was there as a volunteer. But overall, I think in general, not just teachers, people didn't see their job just as making money. Although everyone wanted to make money and wanted to advance and do better, it wasn't like now where everything is a money first. You know, the mentality is different. I know when I started this podcast, which was, back in 2020, a while back, and the first thing people asked me is not, why are you doing it? They're like, how are you going to monetize it? And I'm like, what if I'm not? What if I'm just doing it because it's an opportunity to talk to really interesting people and share that with other people? And people just looked at me like, well, why would you do something if you weren't going to make a lot of money? Not just money off the making a lot of money, right? And the same thing with YouTube. It's all about how do I get monetized? I'm like, what if people just enjoy making videos and getting other people's feedback? But that's considered a failure. You have to be able to make bank on it.
Absolutely right. I quit my job when I had a little under 500 subscribers. So to chunk away what probably would have been a 6-figure year to go to something that I don't even know really the niche of videos I'm going to make yet. It's people are now a little bit more interested in, but what they say is, are you paying the bills? It isn't, this video got 700,000 views with comments that are truly incredible and you're able to provide value and all of these things. Nobody cares about that. It is, are you able to pay the bills? Is it making ends meet? These kind of questions makes you not even want to say what it is that you're doing, especially when, I started this because I wanted to be someone to paint a wave or to just start something, because I don't believe that the average person is getting any sort of recognition. And so I just wanted to try to be a small voice or just someone to try to give a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. And so I think that is so much more important than money. So yeah, it really is just sad to see how our souls really have been kind of corrupted by a dollar sign.
It's really interesting. And it reminds me of a podcast that I did early on when I started this with Marty Neumeier, who I've known for a long time. And when I started the podcast, I invited him on. He's famous for branding. I don't know if he's still with Liquid Agency. Maybe he is. He started a few other things, and he's also quite an accomplished author. And when we did the podcast, he was talking about if you chase money, you'll make a little bit of money. But if you chase the concept and the quality, ultimately you can make a lot of money. And one of his books was a book that was read by Steve Jobs. And he said Jobs had that book on his desk and it said, his name on the cover, like this is his book and don't take it. That's how much he valued this book. And he said it was really interesting to see how Steve approached Apple, which was a quality first, not like how can we make this as cheaply as possible so that we can make as much money off of whatever their first thing was. I guess it was the Mac, right?
Yeah, the iMac, I think, was the first thing.
Yeah, iMac. And then they came out with the iPod or the phone or whatever. But his whole thing was always, how do we make it better? Not how do we make it cheaper?
Mm-hmm.
And now you see where Apple is these days. So he was talking about that and the long-term vision and so forth. And you see that also with a lot of these different channels that have done well on YouTube or with anything else. It's the people who've been just working on it long-term that end up with something really good.
Absolutely right. And I think that really just shows that at the end of the day, people want authenticity. They want connection. They want unity. People really want that. And that's what's going to make a company successful. And regardless if this makes a ton of money or not, I think that this channel is successful because it is starting a conversation. I mean, the fact that you reached out and the kind of guests that you have, that you thought that I could provide as much value or just some value in comparison to them, I mean, that is truly incredible. And how this is going to go across the world to all of the different people in your audience, that shows that a message is being spread. That is worth so much more than $1,000 sponsorship I got or something like that. Just that isn't as, I won't look back at if I have the opportunity to look back at my life, I'm not going to be like, man, I wish I would have taken that $2,000 sponsorship. I am so grateful that I continue to just stay true with who I am and with what I think the person in front of me needs. I think that's the kind of way that we need to begin thinking. It's just hard for people that can't make ends meet, that are really struggling in life to kind of, I think it kind of goes into that scarcity mindset to where you kind of just need to be able to have some money to turn the heat on, So it's kind of that back and forth of, I think that's when we need the leaders to have strong morals and good ethics to be able to pioneer us out of this and to be able to give the opportunity for people to just have some sort of life where they can kind of just step back and take a breath a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. I think that everything is cyclical. So I'm hoping that we're coming to the end of what's been a soul-crushing, profitable for many people, nothing wrong with that, but soul-crushing for almost everyone I talk to, era. And I think the message that you have to share, while certainly it's reflective of what's happening in the U.S., I think it's reflective of what's happening in many places around the world. I mean, of all the people I know in countries around the world, you do hear a similar message in many of them, particularly in developed nations, in some cases in the emerging nations, but more so in the developed nations, that people do feel this kind of a soulless society where we have tons of stuff, but nobody's happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. A book that I would recommend that your audience reads is Propaganda by Edward Bernays, written in, I believe, 1927.
Right.
It is going to paint It's the blueprint of how we got here. He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, used psychoanalysis and went to corporations to create manufacturing consent. I believe that the issues we have, study Edward Bernays and he'll give you the answers. And I think when you begin to understand that, you can begin to deviate off the path that we're having or that we're experiencing. I've learned a lot from that book and from researching him. So I would truly recommend that to everyone. It's a thin book.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, I'll definitely put a note for that in the show notes or in the comments section. You've shared so many interesting things, Damien. I really appreciate your taking the time. I think people who are listening to this podcast in 141 countries as it is at the moment will really find your views interesting. And I would certainly encourage anybody listening this to check out Damien's YouTube channel. It's really well done, well researched, tremendous value there. You will not regret it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you again for having me on. I really enjoy it. And I really enjoy listening to your podcast. And I look forward to seeing the success with all of the different people that you're able to talk with.
Yeah, thank you so much, Damien.